Good morning, guys. Well, this morning I get to interview Hendrick's brother Richard, and I am just looking forward to it. So I'm just kind of sitting here. So this is going to be our first go at it, and we just want to make sure that we're going to be good at it. And all is good. All is well. Now, honey, I'm going to need you to bring the energy and not do anything over there, okay?
I'm getting out of here.
Okay, well, I'm live.
Okay.
Good morning, Mary. I'm just looking at my husband over there. The moment he comes, we're going to invite him in. So this is going to be our first time, and I just want to be here waiting for him. He would be coming here, little Miss Muffin. He'll be coming here in about 3 minutes. Let me get one more thing. I want to get his poem that was amazing, right? I hope you guys have taken a look at his amazing poem called Landlock, because it is revolutionary. It will change your life. It really is. Words have power. Words have so much power. So we got to use our words to build and not break. We have to use our words in the capacity of their greatest power, and that is to lift up human beings. And let me just go get... Hey, Elizabeth. Thanks for coming. He is going to be so excited. He's probably way more interested in than I am, but I'm just so honored that he will talk to us today. He's super laid back from all of our interactions and our emails. He's very humble, but he's a pretty deep and spectacular guy. Let me get that poem real quick. I should have gotten it before I came on. And if there are any questions that you guys want to ask, oh, I'm glad you're just laying in bed. You should be. And that baby is so beautiful. I mean, really beautiful, Elizabeth. If there are any questions that you guys want to ask Richard Hendrick at this time, please message me so I can bring them up, because this is a time that I want to create community. You know, like right now we crave it more than ever. Right now, the playing field is more leveled than ever before. There is nothing that separates us, and we realize this, right? Before we can come up with our own kind of bastions of thoughts and think like, oh yeah, we're totally separated. Prince Charles just tested positive for coronavirus. So, you know, it does not matter. Right now we're realizing it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, how much money you have, esteem, prestige, etc. The playing field is level. And on that level playing field, what we want is each other. So that's what I want today to be. I want today to be a very binding, lifting, exhorting time. I want you to leave feeling inspired, feeling full of hope and encouraged. Hold on, let me go get his poem. Be right back. Okay. What's up, Carmen? I'm so glad you're here. We're just waiting to see Brother Richard. And once Brother Richard gets here, I told him kind of how to do it. So let's be patient with Brother Richard. He is in his home of Ireland right now. Let me just make sure I have not missed him. Let me see real quick. Nope. And yes, Carmen's there too. And it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon for him. So that's why 8 o'clock in the morning seemed the best for all of us. We're like, yeah, let's do this. He's almost here, guys. I know it's 8:01. And, but honestly, you guys, lock down. This, I hope you guys looked it up. I hope you guys have looked it up because it is pretty amazing. Okay, Brother Richard, let's see ya. Let's see, is he here? Yeah, oh, thank you. I mean, honestly, he just gave me the words, Elizabeth. I know they're powerful. They are, but they're honestly just him. It's so hilarious. Like, I never get phone calls at 8 o'clock in the morning, and right now I'm sitting on live IGTV, and 3 people have called me. I'm like, what, y'all, you know you don't need to hear from me. You don't need to hear from me right now. Okay, let me just, I think, is that him? Hold on, guys. Hold on. I guess I should just, while we're waiting on him, I don't know if you guys have all read it, but I will just kind of read the part that just really, I think, just blesses my heart. It's the part where, I mean, the whole thing does, but I love it when he talks about the young lady in his community. He says that, let's see, today a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her telephone number throughout the neighborhood so that the elders may have someone to call on. That's what I mean. Like right now, we just want to be with each other. We just want to call upon each other. And I do think that might be a little bit of a challenge for Brother Richard, because he's like, I've never done it. I was like, that's all right. I'll step you through it. You guys, don't go anywhere. I'm just going to try to find him. Okay. I know. A lot of pomp and circumstance. He's not here yet, but 8:05. Brother Richard, where are we? I feel like I have to go find him. There he is. There he is. We're waiting on him. He's here now, you guys. Should be popping up soon here. We're waiting on Brother Richard. Richard, if you could hear me, Brother Richard, just please press accept. Hold on. Just say accept. Hold on, y'all. So, Brother Richard, see in the bottom of your screen, it says accept to go live with Shay. And just, it says it's waiting on you. So it's popping up for you. Oh, yay.
There we go.
How are you doing, Brother Richard?
I'm okay. How are you?
We are doing well. Thank you so much for this.
You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you good. It just took a moment. Can you see me?
Yep. Yeah, all is fine. Yeah.
That is a serious beard game you have going on there, Brother Richard.
Well,
we like that. So, first of all, tell us where you are right now so that other people who are just getting to know you through your amazing poem, Lockdown. And by the way, I read another poem of yours. You were just
Okay.
this wordsmith, brother, just like on the DL. But anyway, where are you right now, Brother Richard?
I'm in Dublin, in Ireland.
In
And
Ireland.
yeah. So a place called Raheny, which is in northern Dublin in Ireland.
How pretty is it there? I've never been.
Uh, well, it's quite beautiful where we are. We're right near the sea, right out on the east coast.
I was wondering.
Yeah, right out on the east coast here. It's a grey day today. I'm looking out the window. It's a grey enough day, but it's doing okay. It's doing okay. Spring is
Well,
coming
it's
in
kind of,
slowly but surely.
say it again, sir.
Spring is coming in slowly but surely.
I know. Just tell me this. Right now, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's a gray day out too. But I'm
Okay.
not on the ocean, and I'm not looking at any beautiful, craggy like hills that I imagine you're looking at. Okay, so don't take that away from me.
Okay, we can do that.
But but like our spring has been. Our poor trees don't know what to do. It's like spring and not spring. Are you guys having that too?
Up until early this week it really came in. You can see the change happening. The seasonal change is happening, and it's good to see it finally.
Awesome. Brother Richard, are you from Dublin? Are you from this Raheny area?
No, well, I'm from South Dublin. Yeah, about 3 miles away. So
Okay.
I'm over there. Yeah. So originally from Dublin, but I've lived and worked in different places all around Ireland.
Awesome. So I just wanted this time, I want to tell you what I want this time to be. I want it this time to be a time where we just are connecting. And, you know, right now, more than ever before, we need to connect with each other. We know we need to connect with each other. We've always needed it, but I think the playing field is really leveled right now, right? Because
Sure.
it doesn't matter who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the royal family members just tested positive. So it doesn't matter who you are, right? What station in life you are. This thing is really showing us that we are all connected. We all
Sure.
desperately need each other.
Yeah.
And we all have so much time on our hands now
Well, that's true.
that we're like, let's connect.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tell us a little bit about yourself. I want everybody to know that you are a Capuchin. Is that correct?
Capuchin.
Capuchin.
Yeah.
Capuchin.
Yeah.
Franciscan monk.
Franciscan. Yeah. So
What does that mean?
we're a branch of the Franciscan order. It was founded by Saint Francis of Assisi in 1209, long time ago now. And we're a group of brothers. We live in brotherhood, in community together. Our life is centered on the gospel, the gospel of Christ, and trying to live that life in a way that's centered on meditation, meditative prayer, and outreach to the poor, to the sick, to those who are in need as well. So in the community that I'm living in, there's 12 of us here, and we have a mixture of apostolate of work. So we have some who are engaged in chaplaincy to hospitals, to hospices for the dying. We also look after a number of schools. And then we have a little chapel here as well. So people come here for counsel, for training in prayer, meditation, etc. So yeah, a variety of things,
How long have you been a monk, and how does one become a monk?
Well, I've been in the order now 28 years.
Wow.
Well, you begin again every day, and you know, as you do in every form of life.
Sure.
And things, you know, things change daily. Things move along, so there's always new challenges and new possibilities. But yeah, I entered 28 years ago. There's a long period of training. We trained for about 11 years. Trained.
What does that mean when you say training? What does training look like to become a monk?
It's a mixture of.
In case.
Yeah, sure. Well, you never know. A mixture of training in meditation, various forms of meditation, in prayer, in community living, various forms of work. We also do a lot of studies. So I've degrees in philosophy and theology and in English literature. Along the way, we try and work in as diverse a way as possible. So I've worked in hospitals, in schools, parishes. I've worked in prisons, worked with the dying a little bit.
Sure.
So most of my work nowadays is teaching the practice of meditation.
Well, and that's one of the things that you said in your email. So I want to know, how did you get into meditation? I understand that it's been a part of your training, but
Sure,
clearly you have taken a real connection to it, and you specifically exercise it in your life and in your counseling with others and helping other
sure,
people do it. So what
sure.
does meditation look like for you, and how did you kind of get into that part?
Sure. Well, I think for a lot of people nowadays, I mean, there are so many diverse forms of meditation out there, secular meditation, Buddhist meditation, all different kinds of forms.
Hmm.
Within the Christian tradition, meditation has been a part of that from the beginning as well.
Sure.
But it centers itself on coming to a point of stillness so as to enter into awareness of the presence of God.
Hmm.
The presence of God within, and the presence of God in creation and in every other human being and every other being really that we meet. So in the Franciscan tradition particularly, the idea that St. Francis gave was to recognize that all of creation is one great family. We recognize all other beings as brothers and sisters. St. Francis used to
Yes.
refer to brother sun and sister moon and, sister mother earth, etc. And
Oh,
to
I
recognize
like
that,
that.
to recognize that all of creation, if we recognize that it comes from one father, from the divine, then we are all effectively part of one great family. And so my
Aren't we?
job as such, in terms of my meditative awareness, is to encounter anyone, yourself or anybody else, as a sister or as a brother, and to try and be a brother to them.
Oh my God, I love that. That is, it's to me so beautiful. And I love that you are referencing old Christian thought and philosophy. The reason why I like it, I'm open to all. I don't care who you are and what you believe, but I love that you are referencing old Christian thought, because over here in the West, specifically America, Christianity has its very own thing that has little to do with anything you're talking about.
Mm,
And it makes me sad, right?
sure, sure.
Um, because I'm listening to the words that you're saying, and I'm thinking about different churches that I've attended, and some of the words that you're saying would evoke um, probably fear
Okay.
and out of them, like, wait a minute, we're a part of the earth, the sun, the moon. That would
Mm.
feel very probably, they may not have the word for it, but paganistic. They would really refute it, which is really interesting to me, because at the essence of what we believe, we should believe this. We are one.
Well, there's a distinction, I suppose, between what we would call pantheistic thought, which is
Yes.
where people recognize nature as God, and
Sure.
what the Christian tradition has always taught for 2,000 years has taught, which is panentheism, which is
Right.
the idea that
And
God is present in creation, but
that's
is
right.
also at the same time transcendent and beyond creation.
Right.
So one of the great early church teachers, Saint Augustine, put it beautifully. He said, God has written two scriptures, the scripture you hold in your hands and the scripture of creation. And both of these are meant to speak to each other so that we can come to know God through both. They're
Yeah.
complementary. And so if I sit with in contemplation of a stone or a tree or a bird or another human being, that contemplation should lead me to look at the origin of that stone, that bird, that other human being, and to
Agreed.
recognize that these are loving expressions of the divine. And if I go to scripture, I'll find in the Psalms or in the book of Genesis exactly that teaching
I
that's
know.
present, that everything that is there. So we try and find a complementarity through these understandings. Yeah.
I love that. And it's fully supportive, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's why it's so interesting to me. When I was a little girl, I remember when I encountered racism for the first time. And I was about 7 years old. And up until then, I don't ever recall having a thought of it, right?
Sure.
And so I remember being like, this is the truth. I was treated so poorly and made to realize that there was something really wrong, or like there was this narrative about this that had nothing to do with me. I did not know that. I often tell people, like my friends who are in my circle, I was like, I didn't know I was Black until I was 7 years old. I'm from
Sure.
the Bahamas, so most people looked like me.
Mm.
And therefore, just like you don't wake up in the morning and identify necessarily and go, I'm a man with an awesome beard, although you do have one.
Thank you.
I don't wake up in the morning and go, I am a Black person. You know, I'm just living my life. And so when I was confronted with these kind of dreadful things, I was really hurt. I'm 7 years old, so I don't really have the capacity and the level of intelligence and the way to interface with it right now.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I remember praying to God, and this is the truth. It's actually, it hurts my heart to think that a little 7-year-old girl prayed this. I remember praying to God, would he just make me white? Would he just make me white so that these people would stop teasing me and I could just be white? And as I grew older, I realized that, God, dog, even if we were all white, even if we were all from Raheny, we are so creative in finding ways to hate one another and to move from the truth that we are, in fact, brothers and sisters. It's like we fight that truth. So how do you, I guess, help fight against that? Because it seems like all of humanity fights the truth that we are one. Fights it.
But I think that the Franciscan tradition that I belong to says that in any encounter with another being, it's my responsibility to discover that unity. So it's my responsibility. It's not up to the other to try and make an approach to me. My approach has to be an approach of emptiness, of humility, of compassion. And once we begin to approach the other in that way, then the first thing we discover is the deepest level of being, which is, you know, as you are in front of me and as I am in front of you, we are both reflections of the divine.
Right.
And if we consider that the person in front of me is a mirror that's meant to show to me, you know, new ways of being, new possibilities, the richness of the human expression, the diversity that exists within creation.
Yeah.
Then there is an invitation for me to listen. And I think one of the biggest difficulties as human beings is that we speak first and listen later. So one of the things that perhaps this current crisis is teaching us is silence, is stillness, is the idea of having to be present to ourselves. And when we are present to ourselves, we also find things that maybe we don't like or that we're not happy with, things that we want to change. But then to recognize that there is an invitation in that then to surrender to the truth of our being. You know, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, nobody is perfect.
Right.
But the freedom that comes from admitting that also allows for the possibility of change. It means that your life might look very different in a couple of years' time. My life might look very different in a couple of years' time. But there is a freedom to recognizing that as I move and as you move through this world, as we negotiate our path through this world, underneath all of that, there is a fundamental unconditional love that recognizes your essence and my essence as being worthwhile, because otherwise we simply would not exist.
Absolutely. Oh, I love you. That is so true. I'm just trying to think as you're talking, the practical application of such. One, I do love the fact that you said it's not incumbent upon them, the other, to establish that oneness. If I recognize, and I have been enlightened to understand that oneness exists, the onus is on me. The onus is on me to step into that space with them and recognize that we are brothers and sisters. And would you say it maybe like the onus is on me to find the piece of, I always think in pictures. So I think about us standing on the same piece of soil. And so anytime I'm interfacing with a person, I'm always thinking, what piece of earth do we stand on that's the same? What's the same? And so that's my way of doing it. And I think I would just like to know, what are like practical steps that you do when you're sitting in front of someone who is showing themselves to be extremely different than you, and different in ways that you don't appreciate and you don't esteem, different in those ways that you're like, I don't want to be like that. I'm just being truthful. How do you approach that with the onus being upon you to go, let me show you my brother, let me show you my sister?
I think the first thing is slow down. When we speed up, we tend to be lost in the whole area of thoughts that are around judgment and fear. And as long as fear is present, there is distance and separation. So I think slow down, firstly. The second thing is to recognize there is the possibility that the other person may not join you in this sacred space. And that's their choice. That's their choice.
Their choice.
All you can do is leave the door open. A brother of mine recently defined all ministry, all apostolate, as making sure someone knows the door is always open. And I think that's a great gift. You know, if people choose to leave you or choose to reject you or choose to be afraid of you, that is okay. As long as you are able to leave the door open to reconnection at some other point in time. The third thing I think that's really important as well is to invite their story to be told. A lot of people, you know, don't have very many opportunities in life where someone will sit with them and will simply say, tell me your story. Not tell me your story so that I will like you or you will like me, but just tell me your story. And that's where the common piece of earth, the land, as you put it, is found. You know? There was a very wonderful anthropologist, his name escapes me at the moment, but he said that the Latin name for humanity shouldn't be Homo sapiens, you know, why is man or why is human? It should be Homo narrans, the storytelling man or the storytelling human, because that's what makes us different as far as we know from the rest of creation. And I think the point of contact that
I'm
allows
I'm taking notes.
to develop, the point of compassion, the point of contact that allows compassion to develop is when I discover, you know, my story in Dublin and your story in Carolina or the Bahamas are very different, but essentially it's the same story. It's the same human story.
Isn't it? That's the crazy part. Pause real quick. The crazy part is, you know, so you are someone who's clearly rich in knowledge, education, and so you're very scholarly, right? So that's you've extrapolated that through that, probably as well as your travels. But that's the thing about traveling. That's the thing about being with other people, is that you start to. I'm from the Bahamas, but I sound like an American because I've gone to boarding school in the United States and Europe from the time I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And so it often put me from the very beginning in worlds that were not my own, worlds that didn't look like mine. So I remember the first time I met somebody from Jakarta, I was 9. And so I had to figure out where Jakarta was. And, you know, and then where someone was from South Africa, I had to figure Rwanda, you know, the Philippines. So I think the thing about it that has enriched my life is all of these people that I've met over the years. That is the one truth that I know for sure. Is that we all have a story, and our stories are more similar than they are different. It's like, it's kind of like, you know, there's the book, oh my gosh, I'm just forgetting it right now, but it's basically all about story. And basically there are 4 main stories, right? And we kind of just like reiterate them in different things. And that's what I feel like with humans. The more you get to know each other, the more you get to sit with each other's stories, the more that you realize, oh my God, my story is your story too. I just has different clothes on. It just, you know, it just may have sat in a different seat, but the story itself, the places where I was touched, the hero's journey. Thank you, Matthew. That is exactly right. The hero's journey. That's someone just put it there. Yeah. The same places that I'm touched in my story and my heart is broken. You have the same things.
Absolutely.
You have the same things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, you know, we all entered this world the same way. We'll all leave this world the same way. In between, you know, our cultures might be different, our religions might be different, our family experiences might be different. But underneath it all, there is a human being who is an individual expression of divine love, divine life, and who is hopefully going to unfold in life completely. And the manner of that unfolding will be different, but underneath it all, it's going to be primarily about a search for survival, for safety, for love, for integration, for reciprocation of relationships.
You're going kind of fast there for me, brother Richard.
Well, that's part of the Irish gift, I'm afraid. We speak quickly.
I love it.
So all of those elements, I think, you know, you will find in the same. The same in every human life. And it doesn't matter who they are. And it also doesn't matter how different people think they are, because we've been taught, I think, particularly in Western civilization, to define ourselves by difference. You know, it's the individual above all.
Right. It's true. Define
and
ourselves by our differences.
Yeah. And what we discover really in moments like these is that the only way we survive, the only way we come through these great difficulties is recognizing that we are part of a whole. You know, you're a cell and I'm a cell in the body that is humanity. And we've got to work together. Otherwise, you know, the body fails.
I'm just writing down some notes, so don't
No
stop.
Problem.
No
problem. No problem.
So back to my original question. How did you get into the monastery?
Well, as a young man, I was very interested in nature, in creation, in the natural world. I came from a Catholic family, and so there was always a connection between those two things, I suppose. If I hadn't been a monk, I would probably have ended up studying zoology or biology. I was
like a scientist or something.
Yeah, that certainly had called me at that stage of my life. And then I came across St. Francis of Assisi, and his way of living, which was to try and recall Christianity to a simple, joyful living of the gospel. You know, to recognize that the gospel is actually good news. You know, it's optimistic, it's positive. It teaches us that we are loved. We've come from love, and our destination, if we allow it to be, is love. So encountering Francis led me to the Franciscans, and to this particular branch of the Franciscans, the Capuchins. For your listeners and watchers out there, I'd say we're most famous for two things. The great 20th century mystic and saint, Padre Pio, he was a Capuchin Franciscan. And it was also one of our friars who in the 1500s invented the cappuccino. So that's where the cappuccino comes from as well.
Get out of here. To be honest, this is so hilarious. Thank you for making me not feel like a total, silly person. Because honestly, when you wrote it out, and I saw it written actually first on Huffington Post. And then when you sent it to me, you're so kind to give me the phonetic pronunciation, so I didn't look silly up here calling you the cappuccini. And I thought to myself, gosh, you know, like, that looks like cappuccino. But I was like, don't do that, Shay. Don't even try to make that connection. Don't do it, sister.
You were right.
Look how smart I am, Brother Richard.
A brother of ours in Venice in the 1500s who created the cappuccino. So there you go.
Look at y'all. From the Lord is what my friends would say. I'm like the only one who doesn't drink coffee for whatever reason. It makes my heart beat fast. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm hot and sweaty. But
there you go.
But I do love the smell. Yes, Elizabeth. Oh my God. You know, you said something that I'll come back to that. So was it terribly difficult for you when you're like, okay, I think I want to be a monk? Because that, I'm being honest, that is so foreign to my mind. Like, I'm like, even if I were deeply into Francis of Assisi, would I have come to the conclusion like, I want to be a monk, and then go through the practical steps to actually get there? Because you had to do that. So what did that look like?
Well, I suppose at the time, I entered very joyfully. I was very happy with entering and really. And
you knew how to enter. You knew like even where to go. Okay.
Yeah, well, I visited one of the local monastery to us, which is in city centre in Dublin, and I met some of the brothers there, the friars as we call ourselves, and they were very welcoming. And you spend about a year visiting regularly to see whether you're a good fit for them, and so that they can see whether you're a good fit for the community.
Sure.
And during that time, you're also taking kind of spiritual instruction from one of the older men, so around how to discern whether this is something to attempt or to try. When you enter, you know, it's not like the doors are locked or anything like that. You know, it's a process of entering. And so over the first couple of years, the idea is, you know, you can walk away at any stage, and you can be asked to walk away at any stage, you know, if you don't fit in. There's a
And it's only for
tremendous,
men, right? Only for
yeah,
men.
we have a brother. We also have a sisterhood as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a
Because I got
female
some
branch.
thoughts. I'm thinking.
Well,
I'm
there you
just.
go. There's a female branch, and there's also what we call a third order, which is for people who continue to live ordinary family or single life in the world, but who take on the spirituality of Saint Francis.
Really?
So yeah, they're known as the secular Franciscan order. The
What in the
SFO.
world? How does one learn more about that?
Well, Google is your friend.
She
So if you
is. She
if you
is.
if you Google secular Franciscan or third order Franciscan, Saint Francis was determined that everybody would have the opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
live this way of life, regardless of whether they wanted to live within the fraternity or the sisterhood. Yeah, and then we would even speak of a fourth order, which are people of all faiths and traditions, but who simply find inspiration in the life of Saint Francis.
I like that.
Yeah, so that's also there as well.
Okay, so I know one question that I wanted to ask you
Sure.
about, and it just came back to me. So, I loved it when you were breaking it down as to the simple, fundamental beliefs of Saint Francis of Assisi that really inspired you, right? Just the simple, joyful living of the gospel. And one thing that came to my mind is I was recently listening to a podcast, and on this podcast, the lady was speaking about the gospel, the good news. And this stuck with me so much. She said, if it is only good news to your friend, the people you know and love, it's not good news. And I really kind of resonated with that. What do you think about that when you hear that? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like I think what she was speaking to was, like I told you, it is a very different energy space over here in Christianity than I can tell it is where you are. Very different energy space.
Sure. Yeah.
And over here it's very factioned off, and that you might experience that too. I'm
Sure.
speaking from one who doesn't know Ireland intimately. Sure. And so for me, someone on the receiving end, I always think to myself, because I do identify as a Christian. I was raised in a Christian household, but I was raised kind of different than the things that I'm saying now. I wasn't raised with all these factions in my mind, so they kind of disturb me. And so what we see over here a lot is how the gospel is really good for us. Yeah. We're really blessed right over here. It's unfortunate that you guys over here are totally screwed. It's unfortunate. But that's it. So I loved it when she said, hey, if the gospel is only good news to people you know and love, it's not good news. There has to be more to it than that.
Well, in the Gospel of John, the mission of Jesus is defined as to gather together into one the scattered children of God.
Oh my God.
And I think if that's our understanding of what Christianity is, then it's a very different understanding than the kind of factional one that is present. It's present in Europe. It's present over here. Just as much as it's present. Oh yeah. Unfortunately,
it is really sad to me. It really is, because I'm like, when I go into those spaces, I'm like, I don't think this is what Jesus had in mind.
No, and I think that's where the contemplative tradition helps, because it doesn't put me first. It doesn't put my ego first. It puts the other first.
Yeah.
And we see that even in the mission and life of Jesus. Very often in the encounters that he had with people, his first question was, what do you need me to do for you? What do you want me to do?
Service.
That's the first thing. And now that later led the person, maybe after the particular miracle or healing, it led them to a much deeper relationship with God. But at the start, they were at quite a surface level, and that's where we're met. And the wonderful news about Christ is he meets you where you are at, because there is no place, there's no point in time or space that God isn't with you in that space. One of the oldest titles for God in the Judeo-Christian tradition is Hamacham, which means the place. God is the place. In other words,
how do you spell that? Slow it down, Brother Richard.
In Roman lettering, not in the Hebrew lettering, but in Roman lettering, it would be HA apostrophe KOM. Sorry, HA apostrophe MAKOM, Hamacham. At least that's how I've seen it written.
Okay. And it means this, it means the space.
The space or the place. Yeah. So in other words, there is no place either internally or externally in which we are not already present to God. Our problem is we don't tune into that presence.
I'm loving you right now, brother.
There we go.
Oh my
Well,
God.
I'm glad to be sharing good news with you.
It is good news. What
yeah.
you're sharing is good news. And that's, and I would qualify that as the gospel.
Well, there we go. There we go. So that's the idea. The understanding is that we really don't have any place that we can be that we're not already present to the divine, to relationship. My problem or your problem or anybody else's problem is we're all very distracted most of the time, and we get distracted particularly with our own egoic needs. So they have to be let go, and that's the purification of the self that Christianity speaks of, you know. Again, in the gospel, if we go to the gospel, when Jesus is asked about the end times, etc., and judgment and all of those things, the only thing that Christ tells us we will be judged upon is our compassion for one another. It's the only thing that judgment is present around. And in fact, God is presented not as the condemner or the judger, but as the witness to the truth of life, to the truth of a human's life. And so when we look at that judgment scene in Matthew's gospel, you know, where he has the division of the sheep and the goats, the sheep, who are those who have lived the compassionate life, who've discerned the presence of God in others and in all others. Christ is very clear, it's in all others. They're told, you know, come you blessed of my Father, enter the kingdom prepared for you since the foundation of the kingdom. When he speaks to the others, the goats who've lived the egoic selfish life, he does not curse them. What he says is, depart from me with your curse upon you. In other words, by falling into selfishness, by falling into self-centeredness, by living an egoic life completely, they have chosen to
live a cursed life.
To separate themselves. So I think that's really, really important for us to recognize, you know.
It is. It's very important, because what you're saying is not something that one can just take on as truth merely because you come from a Christian background, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That truth you can take on no matter where you are in your evolutionary process. And that's what you were saying. Christ comes to us where we are. And so that's what I really love, is that truth, I don't have to be raised in the Christian order to latch on to that truth. I don't have to be raised believing in God the Father, the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ. I don't have to be raised in that theological teaching to be able to grasp on to the fact that God is love and meets me where I'm at. Meets me there. And holds space with me. Space with me always.
The most important thing, though, is he meets us where we are, but he doesn't leave us there. And that's really important, you know. The invitation is always further, onward, deeper into truth. And that's the point. So it's very important that when we encounter another person, we don't get in the way of grace in their life, you know, that we don't get in the way of where they are. And sometimes if I want them to be exactly where I am, you know, with my level of faith or my level of understanding, what I might actually be doing is getting in the way of what God is doing with them. You know, that God may very well have a very different plan or understanding as to when they will come to levels of faith or understanding of doctrines or teachings or whatever. My job is to make sure that I don't get in the way of that, you know.
You know, when you were speaking about compassion, I want to dive into that a little bit more, and how we are compassionate for each other. The way that I have found that I have been able to show compassion is, and I talked about this with another group that I interviewed the other day, is being able to see the similarities of my story, right? So I've shared, so I had a difficult situation in my own life where I felt really some kind of way about it. And the only way that I was able to have compassion for that person is I thought about, so I don't know if they do this in Ireland. They do a lot. Well, especially in the Bahamas. Like when I was about 16, when you're graduating, everybody would give you this book called My Utmost for His Highest. It was just like this little book, and in it, I can't even remember what day, but there was just one day that it has like these meditations and these like thoughts
Sure.
every day, and they're to just kind of like springboard you into some sort of meditative space and appreciation, right? So I'm reading it, and I'll never forget, it said, there's always one fact more of every man's story of which you know nothing.
Mm.
And so when I interface with people who I find particularly difficult, because I'm always trying to bring it into the everyday, because you are a special soul and you also live in a special environment. I know
Yeah.
you're going to say
Yeah.
you're not, but you are special.
Yeah. Well, the environment, I will agree, is special. Maybe not me, but there you go.
No, it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm always thinking of, when I get to talk with someone like you, how do I extrapolate things from you that I can incorporate into my everyday life here in Charlotte, in New York City, in Virginia, in California, wherever. And so I'm thinking the thing that helped me is realizing there's a fact more of this person's story of which I don't know. And then I start to consider what could have brought them to this place of who they are.
Absolutely.
And when I do that, that's the only way I'm able to have compassion. It's not to say, by the way, and I think the reason why it's hard for people to just release that and be compassionate is because they think that they're saying what that person is or what they do is all right. And it doesn't have to be that.
No, compassion isn't being nice. I think that's very important. There's a great writer, it was a fantasy writer, Terry Pratchett, who had one of his great characters say, "Good ain't nice." It's a very important teaching. One of the old meditations that we used to do regularly in our own training, that one of my teachers gave me, it's akin to that, which is when we sit with someone, to recognize that there is nothing so good in their life that if given the right set of circumstances, I could not also be that good. And there is nothing so negative in their life that if given the right set of circumstances, I could also be that negative. Their set of circumstances and my set of circumstances might be very different, but if it exists within the human continuum, it is possible for it to exist in me as well. And so that immediately gets rid of any idea that a kind of a hierarchy of humanity where I'm better than you or you're better than me or whatever. We just had different experiences. And it also means then that a duty is laid upon me to be able to recognize the good and to invite it to grow. And I think that's very important, the point that you made there, that there are always facts about another that you don't know, and that they may not even know themselves, which is a really important thing. Until you've had an experience, your reality is limited to the set of experiences you have.
Absolutely.
So until somebody, just to give you an example, we have a beautiful meditation center in Dublin that I work in called the Sanctuary Center. You'll find it's on Instagram as well. Sanctuary D7 is the account.
Sanctuary D7.
But when we brought a group of young people who came from a very deprived background to the place, it always sticks with me. One of the children said, "I never knew I was good enough to be in a place as beautiful as this." Right?
Did that just lay you out when you heard that?
Well, I still have tears when I think about that,
Me too.
But one of the wonderful things about it is that for the rest of their life, no matter what else happens in their life, they have now had that experience.
They will have had that moment.
They know that another way is possible.
Oh, you're going to make me cry, Brother Richard.
Well, that's the gift, isn't it? The gift that we all teach each other constantly is that another way is possible. Now, that might be a positive way or it might be a negative way. That's when my choice comes into it, or your choice comes into it, to choose the positive or the negative. But we all know another way is possible.
It is. Oh, my God. I'm just taking everything you're saying in. I'm like, okay, how do I write these notes down fast enough? oh my gosh, there's so many things there. So another question I would like to ask you, you talked about, you know, the fact that everybody just wants someone to say, like, tell me your story.
Yeah.
If someone were to ask you that, Brother Richard, what's your story?
Oh, my story is a mystery. It's a mystery to me anyway. Yeah, it's, I mean, like everybody's story. One of the great images of the human life story that was given to me once was to say that, you know, most of us experience our life as walking down a winding country lane, you know, big hedges either side, lots of turns. We can only really see a little bit in front and a little bit back. Yeah. We can't see where we came from, and we certainly can't see the destination. But the divine is like a hawk or an eagle, you know, hovering over that lane and sees everything, and so knows what's ahead. So the one thing I can say about my story is I have never known what was ahead, and any guess I ever made was always wrong. So that has led me to,
I think that's my
really,
similar too.
Well, there we
my
go.
Similar too.
That has led me to really have to say, you know, well, I just trust for this step in front of me. You know, I just take this step in this moment. And so, yeah, that my story has been learning just to stick to one step.
Just one step, the step that you're on.
Step. Yeah,
that's
the present moment. The present moment.
Ooh, stick to one step. So right now, you know, with this whole COVID-19 coronavirus,
Sure.
I call it the leveler.
Very much so, yeah.
The leveler, you know, I'm like, okay, you are the leveler. I see you and I thank you. I actually thank it. I am appreciative of what it's creating in us. I want to know, like, what's something that you have seen that has surprised you?
In the midst of this, I think one of the things that we've seen is we've seen a huge increase in people getting in touch with us to try and stabilize a kind of a spiritual practice in their own life in this time. Because as the supports, which very often are distractions from real human living, as they're falling away, people are, you know, more confined to home. People are more confined to being present to people that maybe they're not always as present as they are now. I think a lot of people are finding that their inner resources are something that really has to be strengthened. And so the idea of doing all of the things that kind of give us peace or stability that aren't dependent on the external, that's a really important thing that's happened, and a really positive thing that's happened, because I think the more people discover the gift of their own heart, the gift of their own spirit, the greater levels of truth, the greater levels of presence and joy can be present to that. And the other thing I've really been just joyously delighted with is the number of young people who are going out of their way to be present in their community to older people, particularly to those that are frail or elderly or sick, and that's been a real gift to see. There's been a communication and a joining across the generations with this. That's really important.
That is awesome. I mean, that's really amazing. I think it's so funny. Before you came on and I was waiting for you, that was the part where I was making fun of you. I was like, we've never done this before.
I've never done this before. No, indeed.
I was like, I don't know if he knows. I try to tell him in the email. But the part of your poem, because I was just sitting here in this space and I was like wanting to fill it so these people aren't just like looking at my face, like, what is this lady doing? But the part of your poem, Lockdown, that blessed me the most, and I read, was the part where you said, today a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number throughout the neighborhood. That I love the visual of that, and so I love the fact that that's something that's been surprising and also joyful for you, right?
Yeah. And that has actually increased. That young lady who did that, quite a number of her friends took up the same practice,
and they're doing it too.
And they're doing it too. And one
of her good friends, is contagious.
Oh, it always is. One of her friends is a nurse in the Children's Hospital here in Dublin, and she has now started a form of it where, for people who can't visit their children in the hospital, she is traveling around Dublin collecting cards and photographs and gifts and bringing them in. And that's on her very limited time off. She's doing that as well, you know.
That is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
What are things right now that do you have any fears right now? Are there things that you fear? And if so, what are you doing about them? I'm asking the question because I know that there are a lot of people right now, certainly over here, that are very fearful.
Sure.
And fear always creates not good stuff, right? I think at its core, if you take it to the far extent, you'll just have hatred and animosity. And so what are things that you are fearing right now, and how are you dealing with it?
Well, I think everybody fears. Everybody fears. It's part of the human condition.
Sure.
And I think it's important for us to remember that anxiety and fear in the face of the unknown is absolutely normal. So it's really important for people to grant themselves the space to be afraid.
Oh, I love that.
You know, without judging themselves or criticizing themselves. It doesn't matter how stable you are as a human being. When there is an unknown, you will be anxious, and that's normal. It's also the reason why the consistent message of the scriptures is do not be afraid over and over again, because
he knows we're going to be afraid.
He knows we're going to be afraid. He knows we're going to experience it. And it's also to remind us that you know, that he's present even in the midst of our fears, even in the midst of the storm. The other element, I think, just in terms of, you know, what do I fear? I fear my family members getting, you know, the virus. I fear my community members here getting the virus. You know, all of those things are very important to us. There's a very good friend of mine who is involved in care work with the deaf and with the blind, and I fear every day that that's something that could happen, that she could pick up the virus as well. But in the midst of that, my job or my role or my training,
give me the hope, brother. Give me the hope.
It teaches me to bring those fears and to do a couple of things. The first is to sit in a calm space, in a calm way, and to simply name the fears. Fears decrease the minute we name them.
Isn't that true? No, isn't that true?
Yeah, it's very important. Name the fears. Name the fears. You know, there's a very old spiritual practice in every tradition that says what we name, we have power over. And so it's very important to name the fear. That's the first thing. The second thing is to practice surrendering the fear. And that's the really difficult bit. It's the understanding that underneath everything, there is only one thing that we are absolutely certain of in human life, and that is we are all going to check out at some point.
Death.
That's it.
That's right.
And so there's a way of connecting ourselves, a very practical way of connecting death as much as we can. Because the breath is that great rhythm that began the moment you were born, you inhaled, and the moment
Brother Richard,
you will exhale.
You checked out for a minute, the connection went away. So can you just started something with can you say the second part? You said surrender the fear, and then you started going on and it glitched. Okay,
so the way of surrendering is to surrender particularly to the present moment. And the way in which we can surrender to the present moment beautifully, because fears are always about what's ahead.
Right. It's not what's now. It's the unknown of what's in front of me.
No. I'm usually, you know, most of us are at least okay in the present moment because we are at least breathing in the present moment. Right. So if you want to anchor yourself in the present moment, go to the breath.
Right.
Go to the breath. And again, all of the great traditions would teach this, you know. But in the Christian tradition, we see the breath as being a sacramental encounter with the presence of God. The very first thing we are told in the scriptures that God did to create humanity was to breathe into them a breath of life. And again, when Christ appears at Pentecost, he breathes over the apostles, you know. In Greek, in the language in which the Gospels were written, breath, spirit, and life are all the same word. Numa. They're all the same word. So when we, that's where you get your pneumatic tires from, by the way. But anyway.
Thanks for dropping the knowledge. I see you.
When